Good evening and welcome to the Barbara and You Show. I'm Barbara Roy. And before I introduce you to my guest tonight, I want to give you a little bit of explanation about how we schedule guests for this program. Having done this show 26 years, people are always asking me, don't you run out of guests? And the answer is no. There are so many interesting people around. But let me tell you how I scheduled this particular guest. One night I was eating in Friendly's in Holden with my fiance, and I noticed this man sitting by himself reading a book with a very unusual title. The title was Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk. Now that certainly caught my eye. So I said to my fiance, Peter, do you mind if I go over and introduce myself to that man? I find that book rather intriguing. So I went over and introduced myself to the gentleman who is in fact the author of the book. He was just perusing his own book, Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk. Well, I've since learned a lot more about Donnie Steiger as I've read his book. And before I let you meet him, let me tell you a little bit about Don. Don is part Cherokee Indian. He tells me he's in his early 50s, and he lives in Worcester. 16 years ago, Don could not read or write. Today he can. At one time he was addicted to heroin and alcohol. He now lives a normal, he says whatever that is, drug-free and alcohol-free life. Don's presently holding book signings, workshops, and seminars in the hopes of assisting others to embrace each day on their journey through life. Don is self-published and presently looking to get his book selected by a publisher so he can spend more time and energy teaching through his workshops and seminars. And let me tell you, reading this book, Don has been through it all, and he's learned some lessons the hard way, and I think from his experience he can help a lot of other people. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Barbara.
I cannot tell you how impressed I was with your achievements as I read through this book and how I hurt for some of the pain that you went through. But before we get to that, I have to ask the most obvious question. Why is this book entitled Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk?
Well, Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk title came from several. I would like to say that it was this profound spiritual awakening that I had in my life, but actually it wasn't. My coach, when I was running in high school, during a lot of the problems that I've had in my life, I really didn't have anyone that was there for me. And I did end up getting into track and field. And the only thing that I did well was I could run pretty well. And I ended up starting to do pretty good running. And my coach seen me coming across the field, and he seen that I was like up in the top, 5% of the runners. And he ran across the field, and he ran next to me screaming, Donnie, suck up the purple buttermilk, suck it up, suck up the purple buttermilk. And, for the first time in my life, I really had, at this point, I had been through like so much of my life as a child, not being to identify with any feelings, but just realizing there was someone there that was encouraging me. And he was running with me. And so I realized at that point when he said that there was something important, that I was doing something good. And that's when I ended up being the #1 runner on the track team. But I would like to say that it was like this wonderful spiritual thing. But John Lynch, who is one of the most profound writers in Hollywood today, has worked on that 70s show, and he's done a lot of movies. And I talked to him on a regular basis, and after I had finished the book, pretty close to finishing it, I said, John, I got this book. I don't know what to call it. And that's he said, well, I've been talking to him quite a bit about this. And he said, well, Don, what was that your coach used to yell at you when you were running track? And that's when I said, suck up the purple buttermilk, and like the phone was, we were just silent for like 30 seconds, and we just knew. And the word purple, which I did not plan all this, I wish I could say I did, but I found that the word purple is a word of transformation in the Bible. It's a very spiritual word for transforming one. And for myself, Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk is the transformation of Donnie Steiger.
And from reading your book, it was quite a transformation. Now, let's start with the one basic thing that I mentioned in the introduction. You're in your 50s, and 16 years ago, you could not read or write. And you know, that hit me as I handed you the guest book to sign in tonight, how that fear, what are you doing, Don?
What are we doing? We're not on it, but, you know.
Okay.
What we're doing here,
we're toasting with
we're
purple
sucking
buttermilk.
up the purple buttermilk.
There really is such a thing.
Yes, folks, there really is purple buttermilk.
Okay, if you say so. But I was thinking as I handed you the guest book to sign in, for a lot of your life, something like that would have probably traumatized you because people assume any adult can read and write.
Right.
How did you get so far in life without knowing how to read and write, and then the transformation, as you said, learning to read and write?
How did I get, well, what happened, I really don't want to give the book away too much, but because of, because of the traumas that I experienced as a child, I carried that with me as an adult. To get from the abuse and everything that I went through with the alcoholic parents and the traumas that I experienced not going to school much, not knowing how to read or write was not an issue. Surviving each day was an issue. Mm-hmm. Learning to read or write was not important. Mm-hmm. Food, getting food, not getting beat up, those type of things. So I learned how to survive, and I did was I cheated. I copied other people's papers and whatever I could do. But coming up to the point of reading this book, writing this book, was a transformation in itself. To this day, I don't spell very well. All right.
But how did you actually learn to read and write? Did you take a course?
I actually taught myself. I did take courses. I did go to took GED courses. People actually came forth when I was in a treatment facility. I had a gentleman that spent time just to read with me. The first book I ever read from cover to cover was Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, which is a really wonderful book. And that's, it's learning how to fly. It's very good.
Well, it must have been a kind of an awakening for you. Wow, yeah. There's a whole new world here inside covers of a book.
For all the years that I went through of not knowing how to read or write, but struggling and pretending that someone would hand me a piece of paper and I would actually pretend like I read it and put it down. The self-esteem would be drained from me when I would do that. I was living a lie of shame, living this lie of that I was okay, that I fit in, and that's basically what happened. I basically learned from people who stepped forward to help me and to work with me, and it's difficult and it's hard for people to understand that how could this grown man not know how to read or write? I made it to the 11th grade in high school, and no one knew.
Wow. And when you said you still don't spell very well, I know some college graduates who don't spell very well. But the low self-esteem and faking it with just the basics of reading and writing, and coming from an abusive household, did all of this kind of lead you into the alcohol? And I would assume the alcohol came before the drugs. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes. The alcohol was always there. The alcohol in my family was there since I can remember. I remember loving the taste of beer as a child, and this had nothing to do with me not knowing how to read or write or all that, but coming from an abusive household, two alcoholic parents, and the traumas that abandonments and the beatings and everything that had happened didn't help my addictive personality, whatever it may be, the genes that we have that label us the alcoholic or drug addict. It certainly gave me, it certainly fed my disease. It fed my disease. Look, if you came from a family like this, you drink too. Don't tell me that I need to do this. Look, if you came from where I came from, you'd be doing this too. Get out of my way. You use that as ammunition.
How long have you been clean and sober?
I've been clean and sober 18 and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah. 34 years of alcohol. Alcohol was always on the table. It was always there. And so I say 34 years, I'm pretty close to that. I have a picture of me in the book, me drinking at 18 months old, guzzling a frosted mug of beer, and I remember loving the taste of it.
Well, I used to sip the foam off of my mother's beer, but I don't like beer at all. I hate it to this day. Like I say, I have had the pleasure of reading the book, and as you said, you don't want to tell your whole life story here. It's in the book.
The heroin was close to 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
I just think it's wonderful that you did recover, that you overcame this. And like I said, when I read your book, I literally hurt for some of the things that you went through. Now, as I sit here looking at you, I'm thinking, this man shouldn't be in this good a condition. I mean, you don't show the wear and tear. How come I expect someone who's been through work hard on that, huh? But now I would expect someone who...
Don't look at my white socks.
Oh, you had to call it to their attention. But I would expect someone who's been through what you've been through would look more worn for the wear and tear.
Oh, geez, I could tell you stories that would bring tears to your eyes, ladies and gentlemen. Oh.
He's not kidding. He's making light of it, but he's not. Were there times you looked in the mirror and maybe didn't recognize yourself?
Yes. I didn't, up until getting sober, it was very difficult for me to look into the mirror and actually love the person that I seen. That's what this is really about. This whole thing is, the transformation is learning to love ourselves. That's the key. What do you do when you grow up and you know nothing but pain and abuse? There's some having fun, but then at some point in my childhood, I stopped laughing. I stopped realizing that this isn't fun anymore, that I'm carrying the shame of years of abuse, and so yeah.
So how did you lick it?
How did I lick it? Well, you did, Barbara. You did say that it's a good thing that you recovered, and our government has spent billions of dollars in research on heroin addiction and our borders and stopping the heroin from coming over, and they've actually monitored addicts, and they spent an hour and a half with FBI agents and special investigators and doctors and lawyers, billions of dollars. They still have treatment facilities all over the country, and they finally came up with the conclusion after all of this. The last gentleman said to the judge says, so what are the statistics for recovery from this deadly disease? and he said with a tear in his eye, Your Honor, there isn't any recovery. Not one statistic, not one person recovers from this.
So you are recovering?
I am recovering.
Okay. Now we're
I
familiar
know
with that.
I went around the world with
That's
the
okay.
question, but
But
I thought that was a good point.
Alcoholics Anonymous always uses that phrase that you're never really, you're once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. You're one drink away from being back there?
I believe so. The best thing is not to take the first drink.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or the first drug.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have any answers for people that are want to use or that are using, except complete abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing that's gonna, it's the only thing that works.
And it amazes me that knowing all the dangers, having all the warnings, seeing people like yourself, young people still get into this.
Yes.
Why?
For one thing, it's the same as it's fitting in. Kids in school you could come from the Waltons family and still be an addict. You could come from a very wealthy family, very well-to-do. The one thing about the drugs is the heroin especially, and it's so cheap now. It's like $7 a bag, and it's like 90% pure. And the problem that we're having is the kids are getting addicted to it. It's very highly addicted. They just do it a couple of times, and that's it.
They're addicted.
Yeah. And what happens is the reason the kids get into it is they're experimenting, all right? And a lot of times it's because they want to fit in. If going to school, you're feeling inadequate about yourself, you don't have any friends, and somebody says, hey, Barbara, come over here with us. Oh, okay, all of a sudden I have some friends. What are you doing? Well, we got this stuff. You want to try it? All right, I don't have anything else to do. I'm not feeling good about myself. I'm not feeling like I fit in. Low self-esteem. Definitely, when you have that, you can't say no. There's, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. If I'm lonely, then I'm going to want to hang out with somebody that's maybe the cool people.
Yeah, I've only recently learned that phrase, HALT. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Right.
That's not a good idea to make decisions at that time, right? You've got all those things going against you. Do you get opportunities to speak to young people about drugs and alcohol?
Yes, I do. From time to time, yes. And I will be speaking up at the Worcester Courthouse with Bill Madding is in charge of the Worcester Courthouse. They're having kids that are on probation, and they're also using this book, and they're doing book reports on it, on each chapter. One of the problems, like we were talking about, Barbara, is the kids, if I don't know how I feel, what do I do? I act it out, or I project it onto others, or I take drugs and I stuff it, and then it comes out maybe later on. But luckily, I can take the time later on to do that. So yes, so what this is doing, it's actually from my childhood, talking about how I felt, what I went through, and and the feelings. So they're identifying feelings with how they feel now. I mean, if I'm sitting here on probation and I might be going to jail, obviously there may be something wrong. Either that or I want to change the world to the way that I want it to think. And do you think that's going to happen? I doubt it. But I've tried that. It doesn't work too well.
Yeah. Let me just tell our viewers, if you happen to tune in late, we're speaking with Donnie Steiger, who wrote this book called Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk, and he's actually sitting here drinking purple buttermilk. But it deals with Don's previous addiction to drugs and alcohol, and it is a startling book. I have to say, it's disturbing to read the book, but once I started, I wanted, because I knew you turned out okay. See, I met you at this end of that, so I knew you turned out okay, and I wanted to read the book and find out how you got there. But I would think if young people read that book and hear what you went through, and it sounds to me like you told it from your gut. It's an honest story of what you went through.
Yeah.
I would think that would have a tremendous impact on young people's lives. We hope so.
It is.
Now, your own personal, I mean, all you can really do is tell people your personal story primarily. And what insights have you come to? How have you grown through all this pain and suffering to get to where you are today?
I've grown, and the transforming is the layers of, first of all, one of the reasons why that I've written this book is because I was tired of what I talked about before. We either project it onto others, the pain, or we stuff it. I was stuffing it. For many, many years I stuffed all the abuse. I held it all in, never told anyone. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually, they ask one of the Holocaust survivors, why do you come and speak at the college to tell us this painful stuff? And he mentioned, because I'm tired of carrying around the guilt and the shame. You know, why did I live? Why have I lived? Why am I chosen? I mean, I'm sitting here after 34 years of alcohol abuse and heroin abuse, OD'd several times in hospitals, several detoxes, treatment facilities, and I'm sitting here alive.
And you've lost friends.
People are dying still from this. I lost my best friend, Dave, last Christmas, 3 days before Christmas. He died.
From drug overdose?
Drug overdose. He got a hot shot in Boston. And, you know, he was struggling with this disease. And
well, now I find that interesting that you being in recovery, this guy who was still on drugs was still your friend. Can you associate with people? Are you strong enough to be able to associate with people who are doing drugs or drinking?
Well, actually, Dave was sober for quite a long time. Dave was sober about 12 years. And he hurt his back, and that's how this disease gets you. He hurt his back, went to the hospital, they gave him some medication, his disease took off. You know, and your body, my body, doesn't know if it's a street drug or it's a hospital drug. All I know, my body knows, is it's a drug, and I want more. And that's the way it goes. And
well, now, if you were to get ill, would you take strong prescription drugs?
Well, I have. I've gone through that. It's very difficult at times. The best thing to do is, if you're going to do something like it, have someone monitor it with you. You know, have a loved one that understands your problem, that can give it to you as needed. What it says on the bottle, if it says it on the bottle, that's how you do it. Like, you know, not 5 at a time, or whatever. Have someone monitor that. You know.
You can't trust yourself to monitor it.
I wouldn't.
Really?
No, I
after all this
certainly
time.
wouldn't do that. No.
Wow.
No. But I've had times where I've had, you know, minor surgery or whatever, and I can tell you the truth. My body doesn't know if it's a and there was a doctor there administering it, and it doesn't matter who gives it to you. Your body, you know, my disease takes over.
Now, I mentioned in the introduction that you're part Cherokee Indian. Now, I can see some Indian features, but you're very light to have Indian blood.
I'm light. Am I light?
You're fair. Yes. Not what I would think would be American Indian blood in you.
Well, it's part. I think my mother was full blood too. Cherokee. I guess I have the high cheekbones.
Yes, you definitely have the high cheekbones.
You know, so.
And when I said you don't look like you've been ravaged by the drugs and alcohol, do you have some sort of regime that you go through to take care of yourself?
A lot of plastic surgery.
Oh, I don't believe you.
Years and years of plastic surgery.
He's kidding me, isn't he? Yes.
Please buy the book. I need to get face left. No,
I think you have good genes, but see, I happen to know you work out.
That's right.
And I happen to know
But
you.
I'm not wearing them tonight. I'm
Oh.
actually wearing slacks. No.
I know that you work out at the Greendale Y
Yes.
because your book was on my dining room table when my son-in-law came in, and he's like, "Mom, that's the guy I work out with at the Y.
Yeah,
I've seen
I
him
met
at the
him
Y."
today.
My son-in-law, Dima.
Right.
Yes.
He's from England
He's
or
from Russia.
London or
Oh, he's from Russia.
England or Russia, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a soccer player from
Yeah,
Russia.
tall kid.
Big guy. Yeah, real nice guy. But anyway, he's recognized you from the picture on the book. So you do believe in keeping fit.
All right. Yeah. I mean, what I can suggest to anyone that's listening out there today in TV land, that if we have negative in our lives, whatever it may be, what I have done is I've taken, in the transformation, I've learned. I mean, I also smoked cigarettes too. I mean,
Was that past tense? You did
I
or
did.
do?
I
You
did.
did.
I
Okay.
did. I do not
Quit the
smoke
smoking.
now.
Okay.
Believe me, I'm not a saint, but I'm getting close to that.
We'll be the judge of that.
So what? Changing, taking the negative, any energy that we have that's a negative, and we change that. We take, like quitting smoking, join the gym, and you work out, or you run, or I take the energy instead of going to buy cigarettes or whatever. I take that energy and I start reading about what vitamins do. Instead of reading the book for what drugs I can take and how they affect me, I can read a book on what vitamins I can take to help me with whatever. So, I mean, we take the negative and we replace it with something positive. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been working for me. And also, reading literature, self-help literature, getting tapes. John Bradshaw is very good, for adult child literature. Taking care of your body, your temple, is important. Mm-hmm. And that's all the transformation of learning to love ourselves. Mm-hmm. And if I don't take care of myself, how can I love you? Mm-hmm. How can I be of service to these kids that need my help? Mm-hmm. How can I be of service to another addict in a detox? So a lot of people, they don't get this stuff, but it's one thing at a time that we do. It's not, we can't do all of this at once. Mm-hmm. It's just the path. It's the journey of learning to love ourselves, and it could be just a little thing.
Now, you used a phrase in some of your information that you had gotten to me ahead of time. Spiritual steps for recovery. What do you mean by spiritual steps for recovery?
Spiritual steps for recovery. Different steps for our learning that I am powerless over a drug or alcohol. If my behavior is, and I cannot stop my behavior, whatever it may be, cigarettes, smoking, drinking, gambling. What is it? What do I need to do? And one of the steps is to admit that I'm powerless over that. Mm-hmm. Because every time I put a quarter in the slot machine, I just can't put one quarter in there. I got to put another one. Then I'm going to the ATM, and then I'm borrowing. Then I'm stealing. Next thing you know, I'm taking money from whatever, and credit cards, whatever. So it becomes an obsession. Mm-hmm. So one of the steps is complete abstinence of whatever that is, and mm-hmm. the second one is what's the problem? The problem is I'm powerless. Why am I powerless? Why am I powerless? And who wants to admit that? Who mm-hmm. wants to admit that I'm powerless over anything?
But if you don't admit it, right. You can't get better.
Right. Mm. There's many different steps in there, and there's many transformations of forgiveness is very important. Learning to forgive those mm-hmm. who have harmed us. Mm-hmm. It's very important. And a lot of it is basically, once we can forgive someone else without expecting any return, then, and we're learning to forgive ourselves, because once I go to the point to say, I forgive you, and I really forgive you, who am I really doing that for? I'm really doing it for myself, because I am the one that's making myself sick, because I'm carrying around the resentments, the anger, the guilt, and after a while we keep doing this, it builds up and builds up and builds up, and it becomes toxic in our systems. And what do we do? We act out, just like the kid. Whenever we don't know how we feel. How does it come out? It comes out in different ways. I gamble, I steal, I smoke cigarettes, I drink, whatever it may be. And that's, there's several, it's just what I do, and I'm not pushing any of this off to anyone else. It's just what's worked for me. And miracles have happened. This book is full of miracles. And I am really psyched about it. I'm really thrilled to be here on this show and to present this to people. It's a great opportunity. It's a wonderful book. It's helping kids. It's helping adults. I mean, I'm walking, at the Y. I've had people walk over to me and just give me a hug.
Because they'd read your book.
Yeah, and go with tears in their eyes, and they're going, my father did this, and I couldn't believe I loved him so much. I'm like, it's difficult, it's for people to show affection and love, and that's what this is about. It's a transformation. So, learning to love ourselves and to realize and accept others.
And again, we're talking about the book "Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk" by Don Steiger. And Don...
And we're still sucking it up.
And he's still doing it.
Well, I like that poster.
There you go. That shows the cover of the book. And in your... I only expect you to tell your personal story. That's what you're here for. In your story, in your transformation, how did God enter into this? What part did God play in all of this?
God entered into this... First of all, the God of my understanding when I was a child wasn't there. The church that I went to, my father brought me to, and how could God let anything like this happen to me? If there was a God, why am I in this pain? And don't we all ask ourselves that? How could God let this happen? And what I did was I was in a treatment facility, stipulated there for close to a year and a half, and I had been like an addict for all these years. I don't want to give too much away, but all my scorecards had read 0. It was like nobody wanted to be my friend. I'd ripped off my company for a lot of money, and nobody was knocking down my door to be my friend. No one wanted to be around me. I was stipulated in a long-term treatment facility, 5th detox, $200 heroin habit, alcohol.
That's $200 a day.
Yeah, a day. Nowadays, that would be equivalent to quite a bit more. But even back then, it was quite a bit. So obviously, things weren't running very well in my life. I wasn't doing a very good job. What happened was, after I went in there, I was forced for the first time in my life to be sober for a little while. And I didn't like being in this body. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like the way I felt. And I was still telling people what I need. I need you to do this for me. I need that. But you don't understand. You don't know. You don't know what I've been through. You can't do this to me. You know what I mean? I need this. I need that. So I'm still trying to run the show. That's the whole deal. I still think that I know what's right, and left to my own devices, what has happened to me. I'm stipulated in a detox. Nobody wants to be my friend, and everybody's yelling at me. I'm wearing a sign that says, I wore a big sign that was like that. It said, instead of dealing with my feelings in the appropriate manner, I choose to dump them on the floor and act like a baby. So I was crying and dumping and being a jerk and telling my my counselor what I need, you know. So there was this guy named Raul who wasn't getting in any trouble. I was getting in a lot of trouble all the time, getting the signs. He wasn't getting in any trouble. I wanted to get something out of the closet, and I opened the door, and he was sitting there on the bed with his hands, and he was knelt down, and he was actually praying out loud, but it was in Spanish. He was a Spanish gentleman, and I went in the room, and I went, oh, and he didn't get up, and I realized that he wasn't getting in a lot of trouble. I was, and I figured, well, maybe I might ask him what he's doing. So he said, Don, I'm talking to God. He says, I'm asking God, and I said, could you tell me in English, because he was saying it in Spanish.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I asked God to remove the desire for a drug and a drink for this day, and to give me the courage and the will to make it through this day and this program, and turn my will and my life over the care as to God as I understand him. And I said, well, what kind of God is that? He says, well, the God of my understanding is a loving, compassionate God who allows me to make mistakes and is there for me all the time and loves me no matter what. Loves me when I'm, the worst day and the best day. And it's a God that I can talk to, and so the hardest thing for myself was to break down the pride, and so what I did was I waited till he left the room, and then I looked around and I got on my knees and I said that. I said, God, please, I need your help. I don't know what to do. My life is a mess, and I miss my kids, and I just kind of talked to him, and I really felt, this is for myself. I don't know if anyone has ever, but everyone's experience is different. But I felt a transformation at that point where it was like someone put their hand on my shoulder, and I just felt this energy through my body. And from that day on, I felt very special. I felt that I have a gift, and that gift, no matter what, to carry that message. And what I did was, when I got up from that, I had this overwhelming desire to go downstairs and scrub the dirtiest part of the kitchen.
My goodness.
and my counselor comes walking in, and he's like, Don, he's definitely out of character here, and I was enjoying doing it.
Wow.
So, well, what is that? It's acceptance. It's what that is. I've asked God to intervene, and I turn it over to him, and that way there, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to do that. It's a daily process, because I can take my will back anytime. I'm very good at that. Take my will back and start running the show and get controlling. And
I am just in awe as I sit here and listen to you, and after reading your book, it's just wonderful what you've done and where you are right now. But I can't help but think the potential that was in this little boy that was never nurtured. And I mean, you're an articulate, intelligent, humorous human being with a lot of logic.
No, not really.
Yeah, well, you're fooling me, Don. You got me fooled.
Tell me more.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
It's just wonderful what you've been able to do. And you brought out some really good points about relationships and forgiveness. And have you gotten to that point where you could go back and forgive the people that you felt had wronged you?
Yes. I would not have been able to write this book without doing that. I've gone back to, as far back as I can remember, and remembering when my life was for the first 5 years pretty normal, and then the chaos after, the drugs, the alcohol and the abuse and the family breaking up. I had to go back and I had to write all this stuff down several times, and then to also realize, my mother beat me, she put me in a chair like this, and she would take a belt and just whip me, and for a variety of reasons. One, because I looked like my father. They got divorced, and she was an alcoholic, admitted, and my father was an alcoholic too. But she would get drunk and blame me for this, for a variety of reasons. And I wanted me to cry, and it was very difficult for me to cry, so even when I finally went in treatment, I did. So to go back, and this was the last person that I would ever forgive.
Your mother.
If anyone can think of the person that they hate the most in their life, I'm sure it's going to come up like that. There's someone in our lives. Just think of someone in our lives that you're never going to say you're sorry to, and you're never going to wish anything good for them, and there's no way that you would ever shake their hand or give them a hug. And it could be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. It could be a neighbor. But for me, it was my mother. And what a horrible, treacherous, terrible thing that could be to have someone that you would want to nurture you to actually abuse you. Mm-hmm. So to go back to that was very extremely painful. There was a lot of nights where I was angry and I would pound. So I went 28 years resenting and hating her, and the abuse upon myself, abusing myself, got deeper. The hole got deeper and deeper. The pain was so bad. So to go back and realize that, then what do I have to do? The last thing that we want to do. The last thing that we want to do. The last thing. No way.
And you didn't get a chance to do that.
There's no way I'm going to do that. I will not do that. I won't. And that's the little boy in me saying, I'm not going to forgive her. I'm not going to forgive her. But as an adult, I realize, wait a minute. I have control today. I'm an adult. That was the past. This is the future. Mm-hmm. This is today. How do I want to live my life? I believe God has brought me this far for a reason. And this is by no means a religious book, but it's very spiritual. It's a very spiritual book. The forgiveness.
We want people to know that you did forgive your mother. You did go there.
That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
But when you read this, you're reading this, and I tell the worst stuff, and I was able to. My mother was run over. She was shot in the stomach. I used to nurse my mother back to health, and she would go out and drink. I nursed her back to health. She would go out and drink. I would go chase her down at the bars. She would come back, and just continue. But then it would go to L.A. with my father, and then get put here, then put there, and babysitters, and it's just this chaos constantly. So what do you do? So after 28 years of not knowing or seeing her, I realized and my relationships also with women in my life were not that great. I didn't trust, women. And I had a very difficult time with that. And so I had to sit down and say, what's going on here? So that's when I wrote down her name. And the first thing that we have to do is write the name down. We write the name down of the person, and then you think about it, and you look at not what she did to me. What did I do to her? And that's where I had the problem. Because if I'm looking at myself, all this time I've been looking at what she did to me. right?
But you were a child.
Right, but now I'm an adult. I'm taking great question. Now I can take control of it. What is it? I'm holding out resentments, and I am now looking at what I'm carrying. What am I carrying? I'm carrying the resentments, the anger. I'm using it as an excuse for different areas of my life. I'm blaming, and I'm carrying all this, and it takes a lot of time and energy to keep this up, and I keep it right up front, just like that. It's right up front with me all the time, and it's the shame and the guilt, and the blame, and it just keeps it right there. And you're not always angry. You are anger. You know, it's not that I'm an angry person. It's just that I am anger. You know, don't push that button. You know, and so what do I want to do? I want to be healthy, spiritual. If my life has become a much more loving, compassionate person that God wants me to be. How can I carry around this resentment and anger? So when I look at myself, and I looked at that, and then I was 5 years sober, and I realized, oh my God, she was an alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
She was an alcoholic, and I dropped down to the floor, and I just cried. I bawled. I just broke down for like about 20 minutes, and I realized, geez, maybe she had it worse than me. You know, this woman must have been in a lot of pain. You know, for the first time in my life, I realized that I could have compassion for someone who abused me. And that's when I realized that I needed to find her. I needed to find my mother after
28 years.
After 28 years. And thus became my mission to find her. And without giving a lot of the story away, the miracles started happening like that. You know, it's funny when we combine my will, when I combine my will with God's will, you know, to another human being, the miracles start happening. And I'm just so accustomed to them now. You know, I don't take them for granted, but I really believe I'm on the right path today.
But you're fortunate because there's a lot of people who may have gone through a similar experience and their parent is now deceased.
Yes.
And they can't find them and they can't go to them and say, I'm sorry, or forgive me, or I forgive you. I don't know what you do in that situation.
Well, also we realize that we can forgive. When we talked earlier, it's really for ourselves. And I'm not doing this to get her back into my life, or to get my wife back, or to get my lover back, or to manipulate this guy or this girl. When I realize that in my heart I forgive and I love, that's where the transformation takes place. Now, you know, my suggestion to anyone that has this going on in their lives is that if there is someone in your life that is alive, to do it. But make sure before you go, you're pretty set with what you're doing. You don't just go out and do something because, oh, I seen it on TV and Don did it. Well, you got to check here first. Otherwise, it's for nothing. And so what I would advise to anyone that has a problem with someone that's deceased is you take your inventory, and there's several things that you can do. You can go to a friend of yours that you trust. I could suggest a very safe environment, you know, someone that you can trust, someone that you can talk to, and tell them, you know. You can go to the grave site. There's so many different things. You can write them a letter.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And what I've done is a lot of times, even since my mother's passing, is on Mother's Day I get a big bouquet of flowers, and the first female that I run into, I hand them to them and say, these were, these would have been for my mother, but they're for you today. God bless you, and memory of my mother here.
Well, you must have shocked a lot of women with
I
that.
have.
They say, boy, that's a novel approach.
I get a lot of phone numbers that way. Don't
Now,
do that.
We keep referring to your book, but we haven't told our viewers where they can get your book.
Oh, okay.
That's important.
All right. We have a, what is his name? Eric?
Tyler in the
Tyler.
control room has the information. I
Tyler
don't know
has
if he's
it,
got
and-
that on the screen yet.
And I can tell you that it's a Tatnick bookseller.
Okay.
And I'm also a Tatnick bookseller. Oh, there it is right there. See?
Okay, good.
Can
Good
we-
job, Tyler.
Sung up the purple buttermilk. And also I'm having a book signing on the 30th, which is Thursday.
Thursday
from
at
7
Tatnick.
Yeah, Tatnick bookseller from 7 to 9 in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay.
That's a Tatnick bookseller on the 30th, 7 to 9, and I'll be signing them in purple ink.
Of course.
And I'll be
but of
there,
course.
and you can try some purple buttermilk.
There
I'll let
you
try
go.
some purple buttermilk.
Now, we don't have a lot of time left, but I would like to talk a little bit about just writing a book, because here's a man who couldn't read and write 16 years ago or whatever,
Right.
and now you've written a book. It's
Yes.
not an easy thing to do, and
No.
there's plenty of people who think they can write a book, but they try it, and they find out it's not an easy thing to do. How long was this in the making? I mean, from when you actually tried to start writing it.
Okay. First of all, what the work that I had gone into prior to that, to the healing of myself, the decision that was made to write the book was from John Lynch, who's a friend of mine. He's a writer from Worcester on that 70s show. So what the question is, what did I have to...
Well, how'd the whole process, how long did it take you? Were you spending years writing this book, or?
I spent probably 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's it was the story has always been there
Right.
in my mind, but the work on myself was the most difficult part.
Mm-hmm.
I could have written the book probably in 6 months, but in order for me to get to each chapter, there was a healing process that took place. The 2 years.
And
It all
you
depends-
self-published.
I self-published. I looked on eBay. You can get several of them. I just happen to have. It's great unpublished. That is taking it. It's also online at Barnes and Noble if anyone wants to get it online from Barnes and Noble. To write a book is first of all, like anything, it's a decision that you want to do this. Like everyone said, like John says, oh, yeah, he says like in the foreword he wrote, everybody has a book in them.
They think they do.
Yeah, yeah.
I've taught
Everybody
writing
thinks they got a
classes. I
book.
know about that.
So he says, all right, I'll spend some time with you. So we took Sundays and we started spending time with each other. Now, when I started talking to him, he was just totally blown away about it, and he's really, I think this is something that you need to write about.
It takes discipline to actually sit down and get it done.
Well, there's several ways for me to do this. I take notes. What I do is around the house now, I'm starting on a second book, but what I do is my best way. Everyone can have different ways of writing. There's several ways. One, what I started doing was I started talking. I had a tape recorder and I started talking. I started telling the stories. And I put the stories together.
Right.
And then the poems, there's several affirmation and poems in there. Those, after I got the chapters, then I decided, I read the chapters over and I did a little bit more spiritual work on myself. And then I would come up with a poem. I'd write a poem to go with it, to talk about the feelings and and to understand it. So, and there's several ways to do it. You can sit down and write it out, and then you have an editor. What I did was I would speak it, and then I had like John write it, or a lot of times I would just write whatever came to mind, and then I would elaborate on that. Several different ideas come to mind. But to write about, and my suggestion for anyone that has gone or that wants to write about any traumas or their lives, to first, be very gentle with yourself and do some soul searching. I would guarantee that you would go through some transformations in learning to love yourself.
Well, you did make yourself very vulnerable by writing
this. Yes, I realize that too. Because I did some pretty rotten stuff to my kids. I used to steal my son's paper route money and leave my daughter at dance recital waiting for me for like a half an hour. She would be crying.
It's all in the book, folks.
Yeah. So what? It's to put yourself out there. To write a book is even fiction is you're putting yourself out there. It's very difficult because you're actually saying, "Hey, what do you think?" And people could go, "Nobody likes rejection." But at this point, if I have come through where I've been to where I am today without sharing my experience and my strength and my hope with others to better life and to improve a spiritual walk with people, with children, teens, and adults, then it's all, my life is for nothing. What God has brought me from where I am to now for nothing then. And
that is about the greatest summation we could have for this program, Don, and it is a miracle, and it's wonderful what God has done in your life. And I'm so thankful you came to share it with us today. And it was no accident that I saw you and talked to you at Friendly's at Holden months ago. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to Don as I have, and that you'll go out and get the book, Suck Up the Purple Buttermilk, available at Tatnick Booksellers. And thanks again, and keep up the good work.
And keep sucking up the purple buttermilk.
He'll get that marketed yet. And I, of course, thank you for watching and hope that you'll join me again next week. My guests are going to be Marissa Tomasic, I'm not real sure how to say her name, and Joanna O'Donnell, who are going to be talking about starting up new businesses. And also our old friend Mary Chapin-Durling will be here to tell us what's going on at Fitchburg State College Center Stage. I'll be here, and I hope you will also. This is Barbara Roy saying good night, and God bless you.